I don't want anything left untried. Will you come with me, mon cher?
In this video, I want to talk about how I find inspiration in the objects and things in my life, home and house. Now, I've always been inspired by nature and foliage and flowers, but over the last few years, I found that I've also been particularly drawn to drawing the items in my home and house. I've recently filled up this sketchbook and I thought it was the perfect place to show you how I'm inspired by objects in my home, and you will see that certain objects keep making an appearance in this sketchbook. This is my dining room, this is from my spare bedroom, so I patchwork inspirations, items, things I can see in my home and use them to inspire these pages in my sketchbook. I started this sketchbook in December 2022 and I finished it in April 2023, so about 4 months. And it's the sketchbook that I most use perhaps in the evening when I'm sat watching television. So it's mostly pencils, water soluble Inktense pencils, and some just normal colour pencils. I often find with a sketchbook, or my experience is that the further I get along in a sketchbook, the more I like it. I think it's because every time you open a sketchbook, you can see all the things that go before it, and that really inspires me. So this was gouache acrylic paint. Same with these pages. I really like using that type of acrylic paint in my sketchbook because it's so flat. So it means that pages don't stick. When a paint is more glossy, that's what causes pages to stick together. So a very matte paint, the matter the paint, the more likely it is not to stick. So I guess this is like a celebration of the items in my home, and my home doesn't look like this, but I've taken the objects, the things in my home that I'm interested in, and used them as a starting point. You know, and some of the objects have got emotional connections to me. So for example, this coffee grinder was my late mother-in-law's and I love it and it reminds me of her. But there are also things that have no emotional significance. This orchid appears again and again, and it's a plastic orchid from TK Maxx. You know, this vase here was my father's mother's, who used to live with us when I was little, so it's travelled through life with me. But some things just don't have, you know, an emotional significance, but I like the way the different objects relate to each other. So, you know, this is a candelabra that I picked up in a junk shop, so it doesn't have, you know, a significance in terms of the history of the object, but I just really enjoy its shape. And then the coffee grinder shows up again. So this sketchbook, the coffee grinder, my colour choices often bear no relation to the actual thing that I'm witnessing. This is my grandmother's vase again. So the objects are like a starting point. And then here's the coffee grinder again. And here I'm using a lot of coloured pencil.
I don't want anything left untried. Will you come with me, mon cher?
My grandmother's vase again, and you'll see that it doesn't always look exactly the same, but there are echoes of what it really looks like. It's an inspiration, a jumping off point. And then some monochrome pages, some maxichrome pages. Using lots of different drawing tools. So here there's felt tip pen, there's watercolour, there's coloured pencil. I want this sketchbook to be like a joyful place where I can have fun, experiment, try things out, see what works, see what I like, and go to town. And then I often fall down a little rabbit hole. So these are all made with one, fundamentally a black felt tip pen. a little bit more abstract. Vaguely based on items in my home, but then not. I've always loved patterned ceramics and pottery, but over the last few years I think my relationship to home has perhaps changed or deepened or evolved. Now, we've all spent a lot more time at home in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, haven't we? And I think that has prompted me to connect to the objects in my home. We also had a stupid flood with a burst water pipe and had to move out of our house for 6 or 7 months. And when we were living in hotels and Airbnbs, I really missed the objects that I have in my home, and I realised that I have a real emotional connection. They're like friends that I see, and not having the things in my life and living out of a suitcase actually made me look at the items in my home with a different mindset. I now really acknowledge and appreciate that the things that we have in our homes reflect us. They are part of our experience, part of our history, part of our personality and our taste. And all of those things have a story. And so when we bring them together, it can feel like a personal reflection of us. I've got this great quote from Matisse. Now, as I look through my sketchbook, I can see that I often return and repeat the same item, the same image. This quote from him when he was talking in 1951, he said, "I have worked all my life before the same objects. The object is an actor. A good actor can have a part in 10 different plays. An object can play a role in 10 different pictures." The objects that we surround ourselves with reflect our experiences, our preferences, our personality, our history. So I think there's a real richness in thinking about the objects in your home as a starting point or as an inspiration for your art making. If you're interested in knowing a process where you take a collection of objects, arrange them into a still life, draw them, and then use them to inspire some abstract acrylic paintings, I have a new class available, which is called Objects to Abstracts, and it does just that. It shows you how to arrange some items and objects and then turn that arrangement into some beautiful paintings.
I've never been known for my cautious side. You should know that I'm well aware. I don't want anything left untried. Will you come with me, mon cher? So let us just do my love and not stop.